Most people think the refrigerator is the last thing they need to worry about when the power goes out. The lights are off. The phones need charging. The kids have questions. The fridge is cold. The door is closed. And the assumption is that it will stay that way long enough for none of it to matter. That assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes a family makes during a power outage. Not expensive in a dramatic way. Expensive in the quiet, invisible way that happens when a family eats something they should not have eaten, or throws away $300 in food they could have saved if they had known the order. The order. That is what this video is about. Because the single most important thing to understand about your refrigerator during a power outage is not what is in it. It is what order you should be eating it in. The refrigerator is not a vault. It is not a sealed, protected chamber that keeps everything equally safe for an equal amount of time. It is a collection of foods with completely different biological clocks, and the moment the power goes out, every one of those clocks starts running at its own speed. Some of what is in your fridge right now will be fine for days. Some of it will become genuinely dangerous within hours. And the difference between those two categories is not obvious. It is not based on what costs more, or what smells stronger, or what you have had the longest. It is based on the biology of each specific food. Biology that the food safety researchers at the USDA and FDA have spent decades documenting, and that almost no household actually knows. By the time we reach number 1 on this list, you are going to understand something about your refrigerator that most people only discover after a power outage is already over, and the consequences are already real. And you are going to have a specific actionable sequence, not a vague warning, not a general rule, but an actual order of operations for the next time the lights go out. The USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service is direct about the foundational fact this entire conversation rests on. A refrigerator that is full and sealed, with the door kept closed, will maintain a safe temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below for approximately 4 hours after power loss. A half-full refrigerator loses that margin faster because there is less thermal mass inside. A refrigerator whose door gets opened repeatedly during an outage loses the margin faster still. 4 hours. That is the window most families have. And most families do not know it exists until it is already closed. After 4 hours, the food inside your refrigerator is in what the USDA calls the danger zone. Temperatures between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, where bacteria multiply at a rate that is not theoretical or distant. At 50 degrees, many bacteria double in population roughly every 30 minutes. At 60 degrees, that rate accelerates. The food does not look different. It does not smell different at first. But the biology is moving, and it is moving fast. The sequence we are going to go through is not based on what food is most valuable or most important to your family. It is based on what becomes unsafe the fastest, what needs to be eaten first, what can wait, and what you might be surprised to learn is safer than you assumed. Let us start with what cannot wait. The first category to address when the power goes out is everything that falls under what food scientists call ready-to-eat protein with high moisture content. This is the category that most households get wrong because these foods look robust and safe. They are often expensive cuts. They are things people are reluctant to cook under uncertain circumstances. And they are the foods that carry the highest risk of serious illness if held too long in a warming refrigerator. Fresh raw poultry is the most urgent item in the typical American refrigerator during a power outage. Raw chicken, turkey, duck, all of it. According to USDA data, salmonella contamination in raw poultry is common enough that the entire food safety system around poultry processing is built on the assumption that contamination exists and must be controlled through temperature and cooking. Refrigeration keeps the salmonella present on raw poultry from multiplying to dangerous levels. The moment refrigeration falters, that control disappears. Raw poultry that has been above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 2 hours is considered by the USDA to be in a compromised state. In a power outage where you do not know exactly when the temperature inside your refrigerator crossed the threshold, the conservative and correct approach is to cook raw poultry first, within the first 2 hours after the power fails, while you still have the means to cook it properly. If you have a gas stove, it will work without electricity. If you have a charcoal or propane grill, this is exactly the situation it was designed for. The reason cooking is the critical action here, not discarding, is important to understand. Cooking poultry to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit destroys salmonella and most other pathogens present on the raw meat. A raw chicken breast that is starting to warm inside a failing refrigerator becomes a fully safe cooked chicken breast after 15 minutes on a grill. That is not waste. That is resource management. The family that cooks their raw poultry in the first hour of a significant outage has protein secured for the next day. The family that waits 4 hours and then tries to make the same decision is making a much riskier calculation. The same logic applies to raw ground beef and raw pork, though the specific pathogens are different. E. coli O157 H7 in raw ground beef is the organism food safety researchers treat with the most immediate concern because of the severity of the illness it can cause, particularly in children. The hemolytic uremic syndrome that can follow an E. coli O157 H7 infection causes kidney failure and is responsible for the majority of E. coli-related deaths in the United States. A number the CDC estimates at approximately 3,000 hospitalization cases annually from ground beef sources alone. During a power outage, raw ground beef should be cooked or discarded within the same 2-hour window as poultry. Raw fish and shellfish occupy the same first priority window. Finfish like salmon, tilapia, and cod are somewhat more forgiving than shellfish in terms of flavor degradation. But, from a safety standpoint, shellfish in particular can harbor Vibrio bacteria that multiply rapidly even at slightly elevated temperatures. The CDC documents Vibrio vulnificus as one of the fastest-acting foodborne pathogens in terms of symptom onset and severity. It is not a reason for panic. It is a reason to treat raw shellfish as the most time-sensitive item in your refrigerator the moment the power fails. The action for this entire category is the same. Cook it immediately. Do it in the first hour if possible. Use whatever cooking method is available to you, and understand that cooking transforms the risk profile of these foods completely, from urgent to resolved. The second category to address, somewhere in the window between 1 and 3 hours after power loss, is cut fresh produce and pre-washed salad greens. This surprises most people because vegetables feel inherently safe. They are not meat. They do not carry the same cultural associations with food poisoning, and in their whole, uncut form, most vegetables are genuinely quite stable at room temperature for days or even weeks. But cut produce is a different biological situation entirely. When a vegetable is cut, the intact cell structure that protects it from bacterial colonization is disrupted. The cut surface is moist, nutrient-rich, and exposed. It is an ideal environment for bacterial growth. The FDA has identified cut fruits and vegetables, particularly leafy greens and melons, as among the most common sources of foodborne illness outbreaks in the United States. Between 2019 and 2023, leafy green contamination was responsible for more outbreak-associated illnesses in the U.S. than any other single food category, according to CDC outbreak surveillance data. Pre-cut fruit, melon, pineapple, strawberries, faces a specific risk from bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes and Salmonella that can colonize cut surfaces rapidly at temperatures above 40 degrees. Cantaloupe in particular has been implicated in multiple multi-state Listeria outbreaks in the United States, including a 2011 outbreak linked to a Colorado farm that killed 33 people and became the deadliest foodborne illness event in America in nearly a century. Listeria thrives in cool, moist environments and can grow even at refrigerator temperatures, which means a warming refrigerator is essentially an accelerator for any Listeria already present on pre-cut melon. Pre-washed salad greens in bags are another category that most households treat as durable. They are cold, they are sealed, and they look fresh. But the washing and bagging process introduces moisture and some mechanical disruption of leaf surfaces. And commercial pre-washed greens have been at the center of repeated E. coli outbreaks, including the 2006 Dole spinach outbreak that sickened nearly 200 people across 26 states and killed 3. During a power outage, pre-washed bagged greens that have been sitting in a warming environment for more than 2 hours should not be consumed raw. The actionable approach for this category is simple. If you have a gas stove, sauté or roast the cut vegetables and use them while they are still hot. If you are working with fruit that cannot be cooked, eat it immediately rather than waiting. And understand that pre-washed bagged greens are a discard item after the 2 to 3 hour window, not a wait-and-see item. The third category, addressable somewhere between hours 2 and 4, is dairy products, specifically fluid milk, cream, soft cheeses, and opened yogurt. Fluid milk is one of the most perishable items in the standard American refrigerator, and during a power outage, it follows a predictable and well-documented decline curve. The USDA notes that milk held above 40 degrees Fahrenheit begins to develop off flavors within hours as naturally occurring bacteria multiply. Pasteurization eliminated most pathogenic bacteria from commercial milk, but it did not create a sterile product. Bacteria survive pasteurization at low levels and are kept in check by refrigeration. When refrigeration fails, those bacterial populations grow. The specific risk from fluid milk during an outage is not as acute as raw meat, but it is real. Milk held in a warming refrigerator for 3 to 4 hours will typically begin to show signs of souring. Milk held for 6 hours or more in a refrigerator that has lost its thermal reserve may be at a temperature where the growth of surviving pathogens, including some strains of Salmonella and Listeria, that can survive pasteurization at low levels, becomes a genuine concern. The practical rule from USDA is simple. If milk smells sour or has been in a refrigerator above 40 degrees for more than 4 hours, it should not be consumed, particularly by children under 5, elderly adults, or anyone with a compromised immune system. One of the least discussed facts about milk during power outages is what happens when families freeze it in advance as a preparedness measure. Milk freezes well and can be stored frozen for up to 3 months without significant quality degradation. A frozen gallon of milk placed in the refrigerator at the start of an outage acts as a thermal mass, slowing the temperature rise inside the unit, and as it slowly thaws, it provides safe fluid milk well after the normal fresh supply would have been compromised. This is a technique that food safety extension programs at several universities have recommended for exactly this scenario, and it is one of the most underutilized practical preparedness steps for refrigerator management. Soft cheeses, ricotta, cottage cheese, fresh mozzarella, brie, lose their safety margin faster than hard cheeses because of their high moisture content. The FDA's food safety guidelines classify these as high risk during temperature abuse events, which is the technical term for what happens to a refrigerator during a power outage. Opened yogurt in the same window. These items should be treated with the same urgency as fluid milk. Hard cheeses, aged cheddar, Parmesan, Gouda, Swiss, occupy a very different category, and we will return to them later because they are one of the most underappreciated safe harbors in the refrigerator during a prolonged outage. The fourth category to address, generally in the 3 to 6 hour window depending on how well your refrigerator has held temperature, is cooked leftovers. This is where many families make decisions that seem logical but are not. The reasoning goes something like this. We cooked this food. It was safe when we cooked it. The refrigerator is keeping it cold. It should be fine. But this reasoning contains a hidden flaw that food scientists document consistently. Cooked food is not immune to bacterial contamination. In many ways, it is more vulnerable to it. When food is cooked, the competitive bacteria that naturally inhabit raw food are destroyed. What is left is a nutrient-rich, moist environment. A cooked piece of chicken, a container of soup, a pan of rice that is essentially cleared for colonization by any bacteria that lands on it. During normal refrigeration, those bacteria grow slowly enough that the food remains safe for 3 to 4 days. During a power outage, as the temperature rises, that growth accelerates significantly. The specific concern with cooked rice during a power outage deserves special attention because most families do not know about it. Rice harbors a bacterium called Bacillus cereus that forms heat-resistant spores during cooking. Those spores survive the cooking process, and when the rice cools and warms again in a failing refrigerator, can activate and produce a toxin that causes rapid onset vomiting and diarrhea. Critically, that toxin is also heat-resistant. Reheating the rice does not neutralize it. The USDA and the UK's National Health Service both specifically identify reheated rice as an underappreciated cause of foodborne illness. Leftover rice that has been held in a warming refrigerator for more than 2 hours should be discarded, not reheated. Other cooked leftovers, soups, stews, pasta dishes, cooked vegetables, should be reheated to boiling or 165 degrees Fahrenheit and consumed within the first 6 hours of the outage. The reheating kills the bacteria that have grown during the warming period. Eating them cold as the refrigerator temperature climbs is a riskier approach. The order of priority within cooked leftovers during an outage should follow moisture and protein content. Cooked meat-based dishes first. Grain-based dishes with caution. Cooked vegetable dishes last, as they carry the lowest pathogen risk in this category. The fifth category, which can typically wait until the 6 to 12-hour window before requiring attention, is eggs. Raw eggs are more resilient than most families assume. The intact shell provides significant protection against bacterial entry. The USDA estimates that raw shell eggs stored at proper temperatures can remain safe for 4 to 5 weeks, which tells you something important about how well the shell functions as a barrier. During a power outage, raw eggs in their shells can remain safe at room temperature for up to 2 hours, the same rule that applies to most foods. And after that window, if refrigeration is no longer available, the eggs should be cooked and consumed rather than stored. Here is the fact about eggs during a power outage that almost no preparedness resource mentions. The United States is unusual among developed nations in requiring that commercially sold eggs be washed before sale. This washing removes dirt and bacteria from the shell surface, but it also removes a natural coating called the bloom, or cuticle, that seals the pores of the shell and provides an additional microbial barrier. In the UK, European Union, and most of the rest of the world, eggs are sold unwashed and stored at room temperature in stores, precisely because the bloom is intact. American eggs, once washed and refrigerated commercially, need to stay cold because that protective layer is gone. This means that during an extended power outage, American shell eggs are slightly more vulnerable to bacterial entry through the pores of the shell than their European counterparts would be. The practical implication is not alarming. The 2-hour room temperature rule provides ample time for action, but it is a good example of why understanding the specific biology of your food matters more than general assumptions. Hard-boiled eggs face a different situation. Cooking an egg destroys the bloom if any residual coating remained, and the cooking process creates conditions inside the shell that accelerate bacterial growth if temperatures are not controlled. Hard-boiled eggs should be treated with the same urgency as cooked leftovers. Consume them within 2 hours of the temperature climbing above 40 degrees, or discard them. The sixth category is one that creates significant confusion during power outages because it sits at the border between refrigerator-required and genuinely shelf-stable. It is condiments, ketchup, mustard, hot sauce, soy sauce, vinegar-based salad dressings, pickles, jam, and similar products. The confusion is understandable because these items are stored in the refrigerator, which implies they need refrigeration to be safe. But most of them do not. The refrigerator requirement for condiments is generally about quality and flavor preservation. not food safety. The acidity, salt content, and sugar concentration of most commercial condiments make them hostile environments for pathogenic bacteria, even at room temperature. Ketchup, with a pH typically between 3.5 and 3.9, is too acidic for most bacterial pathogens to survive. Mustard, hot sauce, vinegar-based dressings, soy sauce, and most pickles fall into similar categories. The USDA and FDA both maintain lists of foods that are safe at room temperature, and specifically note that many condiments stored in the refrigerator for quality reasons are not food safety concerns, if held at room temperature for extended periods. The practical implication during a power outage is significant. These items do not need to be consumed urgently. They do not need to go into a cooler. They do not need to be discarded if the refrigerator warms. They are already largely shelf-stable, and treating them with the same urgency as raw meat or fresh dairy is a misallocation of attention and resources during a high-pressure situation. Where the line becomes relevant is with mayonnaise-based products and creamy dressings, which contain eggs and dairy components that behave differently from pure acid and salt condiments. Opened commercial mayonnaise is more stable than most people realize. Its acidity and low water activity inhibit bacterial growth. But homemade mayonnaise and dishes that combine mayonnaise with other ingredients, like potato salad or coleslaw, are much higher risk because the bacterial contamination from the other ingredients is mixed throughout a moist, slightly acidic environment. Potato salad and coleslaw are specifically and repeatedly identified by food safety researchers as among the most common causes of foodborne illness at outdoor gatherings, precisely because they sit in warming conditions for hours. During a power outage, any mayonnaise-based mixed dish should be treated with the same urgency as the raw proteins. The seventh category is one that comes as genuine relief to most families when they understand it fully. It is hard cheese, butter, and whole uncut fruits and vegetables. Hard aged cheeses represent one of the most underappreciated food safety facts in the American household. Cheddar, Parmesan, Romano, Gruyere, Gouda, Swiss, Manchego. These cheeses were developed centuries before refrigeration existed. Their low moisture content, specific salt levels, and the acidic environment created by their aging cultures make them genuinely inhospitable to most dangerous pathogens. The FDA's food safety guidelines acknowledge that hard cheeses can be held at room temperature for days without becoming safety concerns. During a power outage, hard cheese is not something families need to worry about in the immediate term. A block of aged cheddar sitting at 60 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 hours is not a food safety crisis. It is cheese, behaving the way cheese has behaved for centuries without refrigeration. Butter occupies a similar category. Its fat content and low water activity limit bacterial growth significantly. Commercial butter can be held at room temperature safely for up to 2 weeks, according to the USDA, which is why many European households and many American homes with butter dishes routinely keep it on the counter. During a power outage, butter left in the refrigerator as the temperature rises is not becoming dangerous. It may become softer, but it remains safe. Whole, uncut fruits and vegetables are the other safe harbor in the standard refrigerator during an outage. A whole apple, a whole orange, a whole cucumber, a whole bell pepper. The intact skin of these foods provides a microbial barrier that makes them safe at room temperature for days to weeks depending on the specific item. The distinction between whole and cut is critical. A whole melon is safe. A pre-cut melon is not. A whole carrot is safe. Pre-cut carrot sticks in a bag are a different situation. Understanding this category, hard cheese, butter, whole produce, is not a minor point. In a prolonged outage, these foods represent the stable foundation of what a family can eat without urgency or risk. They are the items that can wait while the family addresses the genuinely urgent categories first. The eighth category addresses something that most households never consider when the lights go out, and it is one of the most consequential oversights in refrigerator management during a blackout. It is the medication stored in the refrigerator. Approximately 11% of prescription medications in the United States require refrigeration. According to data from the FDA and pharmaceutical research organizations, insulin for people with diabetes is the most common and the most time-sensitive. Many biological medications, including certain autoimmune treatments, hormone therapies, and liquid antibiotics, also require continuous cold storage to maintain their efficacy and safety. The challenge during a power outage is that temperature excursions in medication, the technical term for when a medication exceeds its specified temperature range, do not always produce visible changes. Insulin that has been held at room temperature for an extended period may look identical to insulin that is perfectly viable. The potency degradation is invisible. The consequences of injecting compromised insulin for a person managing type 1 diabetes can be severe and rapid, as the expected blood glucose control fails and hyperglycemia escalates. The American Diabetes Association and the FDA both provide guidance on insulin storage during emergencies. Opened vials of most commonly used insulin analogs can be kept at room temperature, below 77 degrees Fahrenheit, for up to 28 days without meaningful potency loss. This is a fact that most insulin users know, but that families who manage a diabetic member's supplies may not have fully internalized. The key is the temperature ceiling, 77 degrees. A refrigerator that has been without power for 6 hours in a warm climate may already be approaching or exceeding that threshold depending on ambient conditions. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, which affected Florida with extended power outages lasting days, in some areas, insulin management emerged as one of the documented public health concerns in the aftermath. Community health centers and pharmacies set up insulin cooling stations, and the Florida Department of Health issued specific guidance on insulin temperature management during the event. This is not a rare or theoretical concern. It is a recurring documented public health reality during every extended power outage in a warm climate. The action for this category is to know which medications in your household require refrigeration, know their specific temperature tolerances, and have a plan in place. Whether a cooler with ice, contact with a pharmacist, or access to a community resource, for managing those medications before the power outage begins rather than after. The 9th category brings us to one of the most confusing items in the typical American refrigerator during an outage. And it is one where the conventional wisdom is almost exactly backwards from what the science supports. It is leftovers stored in opaque containers that the family cannot see into. This sounds like a narrow edge case, but it is not. The average American refrigerator contains 3 to 5 opaque storage containers at any given time, according to behavioral research on household food storage habits. Mason jars, plastic containers with lids, takeout containers, foil-wrapped items. The refrigerator is full of things that require opening to assess. The conventional wisdom during a power outage is to keep the refrigerator closed as much as possible to preserve cold. That is correct. But the corollary behavior that families adopt, not opening any containers to check what is in them, creates a specific problem. The family then makes decisions about what to eat and what to save based on estimates and guesses, rather than actual knowledge of what is inside the containers and how long it has been there. Food safety researchers at the University of Minnesota's Extension Food Safety Program have documented what they call the unknown leftovers problem in consumer refrigerator behavior. Households regularly store cooked food without labeling the date it was cooked. They store leftovers from multiple different meals in similar containers. And during normal non-emergency life, the consequence is modest. Some food gets forgotten and discarded. During a power outage, when those containers need to be assessed and prioritized rapidly, the lack of information becomes a genuine obstacle to safe decision-making. The preparedness implication of this finding is simple and actionable. The practice of labeling containers with their contents and the date they were stored costs nothing and takes 10 seconds per container. It transforms the decision-making during an outage from guesswork into clarity. You open the refrigerator once, assess every container rapidly, and execute the sequence correctly. Cook and eat the oldest and most vulnerable items first. Save the stable items for later. If you are in a power outage right now reading or listening to this, and your containers are unlabeled, open each one, assess what is inside, and make a physical note or tell every member of the household what is in each container. Information is a resource. During a crisis that is time-sensitive, it is one of the most valuable resources you have. The 10th and final item on this list is not a food. It is the single most important tool you can have in your refrigerator during a power outage. And most households do not own one. It is a refrigerator thermometer. The entire framework of food safety during a power outage, the 4-hour window, the 40-degree threshold, every decision about what to eat and what to discard, depends on knowing what temperature your refrigerator is actually maintaining. Without a thermometer, you're estimating. You are using the feel of the air when you open the door, the coldness of surfaces, the formation of condensation, none of which are reliable indicators of the actual temperature inside the unit. A study by researchers at the University of Alabama, in collaboration with food safety extension programs, found that between 40 and 60% of American household refrigerators run at temperatures higher than 40 degrees Fahrenheit, even during normal operation, before any power outage occurs. This means that for a significant portion of households, the 4-hour safe window that the entire USDA power outage guidance is built on starts from a baseline that is already compromised. A refrigerator that was running at 44 degrees before the power failed has less thermal reserve than the standard guidance assumes. Its safe window is shorter than 4 hours. A refrigerator thermometer costs between $8 and $15 at any hardware store or online retailer. It requires no installation. You place it on a middle shelf. Check it once when you bring it home to verify your refrigerator is actually maintaining the correct temperature. And then, you have the information you need to make accurate decisions the next time the power fails. This matters more than it might seem at the level of principle. Every piece of guidance in this video, every food safety window, every prioritization decision, every call about what to cook first and what can wait, is calibrated to a refrigerator that starts at 40 degrees or below. If yours is starting at 45 or 47 degrees, which the research suggests is entirely possible, your windows are shorter, your decisions are more urgent, and the consequences of misjudging are proportionally higher. The thermometer does not just protect you during a power outage. It tells you whether your refrigerator is actually doing its job every single day. And the families that check it, who know their refrigerator is running at 38 degrees and has been all along, make different and better decisions than the families who assume everything is fine because the refrigerator door opens cold. Here is what all of this adds up to. The refrigerator during a power outage is not a storage crisis. It is a decision crisis. Every item inside it has a specific biological clock that the power outage just started running faster. Some of those clocks move in hours, some in days. Some of the things you thought were fragile are more durable than you assumed, and some of the things you thought were safe are more time-sensitive than anything on the shelf. The families that navigate this correctly are not the ones with the best refrigerators or the most expensive food. They are the ones who knew the sequence before they needed it, who cooked the raw chicken in the first hour, not because they were panicking, but because they understood that cooking transforms the problem, who ate the soft cheese and the cut melon before they got to the canned goods, because they knew the order mattered, who looked at the block of aged cheddar and understood that it would still be fine tomorrow. That sequence, that specific, ordered knowledge about the food you already own is free. It costs nothing. It requires no special equipment beyond an $8 thermometer that tells you what temperature you are actually working with. And it is the difference between losing everything in your refrigerator during an extended outage and losing nothing. The power goes out the same way for every family on the block. What happens in the hours after is entirely about what decisions were already made and what knowledge was already present. That is what separates the family that goes to bed calm from the family that spends the night worrying about what they might have eaten. And if you are thinking about the rest of your preparedness, the food that does not need refrigeration, the water supply, the things in the pantry that last for years. That is the other side of this equation. The refrigerator tells you what to eat first during a crisis. The pantry tells you how long you can wait before you need to worry about anything else at all.